Hi everyone, so in a quick video here I want to talk about what makes a good paragraph. We wrote our LO Veto paragraphs. I put comments on there, and so you should look at the comments to see specifically what I said about yours. But even after you look at those comments, you might still have some questions. So I wanted to alert you to some of the major issues that I'm concerned about with a paragraph. So realize that a paragraph should consist of a single idea, right? That's why we have a paragraph, right? That's why if you look over here, paragraphs are indented at the beginning because they tell you, oh, look, this different thing, this space here tells you it's a new idea. And everything in this paragraph will be a particular idea. And as we said, the sentence that tells us what that idea is, the sentence that tells us what that paragraph is about, is called the topic sentence. And as I said in this assignment, I wanted your topic sentence to be the first sentence. Now, a topic sentence can actually be any sentence in the paragraph, but it's a lot harder to have a topic sentence somewhere besides the first one. It's easier to put it at the beginning because it tells us at the beginning, this is what this paragraph will be about. It's possible to put at the end, but that's a lot more complicated to do to make the reader feel like they know what the paragraph's about before you tell them what it is about at the end. It's a little strange. Again, it can be done, but it's a lot more complicated. So for our purposes, we're always going to have our topic sentence at the beginning of the paragraph. So let's see how we're doing here with that. This says, in LOV though, Judith Ortiz Cofer uses everyday things as metaphors to warn those who may lose track of their roots. So it seems like what this paragraph is going to be about is how she is using everyday things as metaphors, and to do what? To tell us about how people may warn people about losing track of their roots. All right, so let's see if all the rest of the sentences relate to that. One example of this is seen in line 2 when Cofer says it is a dangerous thing to forget the climate of your birthplace. The word climate can mean both weather or the environment vibe of a region. Here, Cofer is trying to say it can be dangerous if one forgets what the general feeling of the place they grew up was like. So they don't use the word metaphor here, but realize that we're saying that this climate is a metaphor for the feeling of what we're like. So this example of the climate does go back to this topic sentence of warning those who might lose track of their roots, right? It's dangerous if one forgets what the general feeling of the place they grew up in was like. Another example of this, okay, nice word here. This is a transitional word, a transition. It tells us we're done with one example. We're moving on to the next example. Another example of this can be found in line 7, where when the author states that it is dangerous to spurn the clothes you were born to wear. I think that that the word clothes in this sense does not literally mean clothes, and instead is being used as a metaphor for something like culture and traditions. Throughout this poem, comparisons like these are used to convey a sense of foreboding danger, right? And so we've got two examples here, one of the clothes, one of the climate, and we're talking both going to be talking about warning those who lose track of their roots. I think in the second one we could have had maybe a little bit more where we might have said, oh, by the way, and it's dangerous to do that. We might have said more specifically about why it's dangerous to not wear these clothes, why it's dangerous to. But in general, this makes sense. We had these two examples, and both of those examples are examples of how we're using everyday things as metaphors to warn those who might lose track of their roots. So we've got a clear topic sentence, and both examples are clearly related back to that topic sentence. So this is a pretty good one. Let's look at one that's not working as well as it could be. This one says, in the short poem El Olvido, the poet uses the lines, the climate of your birthplace and weapons as sharp instruments, as metaphors for the old and new lifestyle of the character in the poem. So far, so good. That's not bad. I don't have a problem with that as a topic sentence. But let's just see what happens as we go through the paragraph. It says, to start the line, it is a dangerous thing to forget the climate of your birthplace. Can be seen as a warning to never forget where you came from or where you grew up. Okay, they don't explain that as a metaphor, but we get the idea, and it's kind of related back to that. Also, the line, it is dangerous to spurn the clothes you were born for the sake of fashion, represents the individual in the poem leaving their culture behind and adopting a new one by wearing what the culture seems as fashionable. It's a good point. However, the topic sentence said we're going to talk about climate of your birthplace and weapons and sharp instruments. It said, look, we're going to be talking about those two things. That's what this paragraph is about. But then they start talking about those clothes. And those that's not in the topic sentence, so we're a little bit confused. Now, it's not a huge confusion, but realize that if we're not clear about that all the time, it can potentially get confusing in other situations where we aren't clearly saying at the beginning, this is what this paragraph is going to be about. Because if we say here's what this paragraph is going to be about, and we start talking about something else, that's going to cause some confusion. If I say this is a video in which we will be talking about how best to construct these paragraphs, and then I start talking about some quiz that you have to take, you're like, wait a minute. You said you're going to talk about these paragraphs. Why are you suddenly talking about a quiz? You switched up on me, right? And so you need to make sure that you are as clear as possible about that. Now, what we could have done, this person said that we're going to talk about climate of your birthplace and weapons and sharp instruments. If they had simply said climate of your birthplace, clothes, and weapons and sharp instruments, then that would have meant, okay, you've told us we're going to all three things you're going to be talking about. Or, maybe even better, we could have done what this person did, which said the poet uses everyday things as metaphors, right? They gave just the general sense. And so however many examples you have in there and whatever specific examples you have, it's fine. Because you've said there are a bunch of different things that are going to be used as metaphors that to warn those who may lose track of their roots, right? And so however many metaphors you use is fine. And so this person potentially, it actually got them into trouble to try and be more specific because then they added in an extra one that wasn't there. So again, they could add in that third one. That might make the sentence a little long, or they could simply say there are a number of metaphors. And once we do that, we go, okay, there are a number of metaphors, and here's what those metaphors are doing. And you want to be very specific about what they're doing. Let's look at this third example that is a bit of a problem because it says throughout the poem El Olvido by Judith Ortiz Cofer, there are many metaphors used in a way that brought about many different ideas that had far more meaning behind it. And see, the problem with that is that not that it doesn't say what those specific metaphors are, because as we said, that first one would have been perfectly fine, right? It didn't list the metaphors, but it did tell us what those metaphors meant. Here, this one says there are a bunch of metaphors used in a way that brought about many different ideas. Well, I don't know where this paragraph is going because there could be all kinds of different ideas. Those other two paragraphs, the first two, said very specifically what those metaphors would be doing. Metaphors for the old and new lifestyle of the character in the poem. All right, so we're going to be talking about the old versus the new lifestyle. And all the rest of the metaphors do that. Or in this one, we're going to say specifically to warn those who may lose track of their roots. That's even better. That's more specific. And so we know what those metaphors are going to do. We don't need to know exactly which metaphors we're going to use, but we do know exactly what they're going to mean. And so this third one becomes a problem because it simply says, look, there's some metaphors that are going to be about, some ideas. And that's going to be too broad. So you want to try and have a more focused topic sentence. And so I think this first one is the best because it simply says there are a number of metaphors, and here's the idea that they're going to get across, and then we're ready to talk about whichever metaphors come up. So keep that in mind for your paragraphs.